A very good evening, happy new year to all of you. This is one of those year end or year beginning reviews of what the previous year brought us. So 2022, and you'll have to excuse me. I'm looking behind me and stuff because I'm one camera down for. I needed one of my cameras for something else, and I've not managed to set it up yet. Yes, so a very good evening to you as well, Gary, and a happy new year. Yes, please, if you find these transmissions of value, please like, please share, and please subscribe to the channel. I get so many messages every time I transmit from people saying, oh, have you got a link? Well, if you subscribed, you'd automatically and click notifications, you'd automatically get the link, because these transmissions are all free to air. We changed sometime last year. Moving forward into 2023, the Sunday night transmissions will now no longer take place. So as long as you're all aware, we unfortunately didn't get, in the end, we fell rather short of our fundraising target. And I don't blame those of you who didn't get what you wanted, so you stopped subscribing. Again, that's completely acceptable. It's not my money, it's your money, and what you do with your money is entirely up to you. So those of you who stopped subscribing, that's completely fine. Between now and moving forward, from the conversations I've had with people, I think what I'm going to do is stay away from the campaigning. The days of the Conservatives or the Independents or the Lib Dems or any other political party using me for their gain are over and done with. So I won't be campaigning moving forward to the elections. But what I will continue to do with some shorter broadcasts, I think, transmitted during the week, will be the awareness raising, the education, and the analysis that those of you who've supported me for the last 3 or 4 years value. So that is what my focus will be on moving forward. What I'll also do is this coming week, those of you who've been in touch with me over Christmas and New Year and I've not got back to you, it's because my emails, I refuse to look at them over Christmas and New Year. It's something I've done for a long time. So I know one or two of you have sent me messages saying, I've sent you an email, why have you not responded? Not responded because it's Christmas. And I will turn my emails on tomorrow and get back to all of you who I can get back to. But so we are all clear. The journey as was has ended, and we'll move forward in a slightly different way, I think. Okay, so let's do a quick review of what was 2022. Now, 2022 for me started with a visit to Tameside Police Station, where Detective Sergeant Christopher Dean charged me for an offence. And what I found really interesting with the beginning of 2022 and the charging of an offence was Christopher Dean attempted to claim that by him charging me for an offence meant that I would not be allowed to campaign up to the May local elections against AROOJ SHAH. And he outright threatened me and told me I was being recorded. Well, guess what? The trial that I'm coming up for, my legal team have requested the video footage of Christopher Dean threatening me. And do you know what the CPS and the police are trying to claim? They delete the video footage at the police station. They are trying to claim they delete the footage at the police station, as if it's some sort of kebab shop and takeaway. As it's some sort of kebab shop and takeaway. They delete the footage. They don't delete the footage, but clearly someone has seen the footage and has seen Christopher Dean threaten me inappropriately and attempt to interfere in an election, because that's what took place. I'll see you in court, Christopher Dean. So that was what my January started like. Visit to Tameside Police Station. Slimy as always, indeed, Julie. Slimy as always. Slimy bent police officers. Infested with Pakistani rape gang protecting police officers like Detective Sergeant Christopher Dean. And a whole host of others at Tameside Police Station. But January, for many of you, started with a very, very bizarre story in the newspapers. And it involved Howard Sykes, the leader of the opposition, caught red-handed forwarding emails to a malicious blogger and a proven liar. Forwarding the private details of members of the public. And he was caught red-handed. Howard Sykes was caught red-handed. And in an attempt to cover his rather ample backside, Howard Sykes, caught red-handed, attempted to claim it was a mistake, like you mistakenly forward the private residential details of a member of the public to a malicious blogger who then uses it to harass and intimidate the said member of the public. And Howard Sykes referred himself to the Standards Committee, the Council Standards Committee. The Standards Committee has had over a year. They've not done anything with it. And no one should be surprised because the Standards Committee involves the Borough Solicitor, Paul Bentwistle. The now proven cover-up merchant, Borough Solicitor, who, if ever there was an investigation, a criminal investigation into this town, would see the remainder of his days in a police cell, passing the soap, because that's where Bentwistle belongs, in a prison cell, for his role in the cover-up, multiple cover-up of corruption. Well, Bentwistle and his mates haven't even announced what happened with this standards complaint. I'll tell you what's happened with the standards complaint. Absolutely nothing, because Harry Caffrell and Bentwistle would have helped cover it up. And for those of you who believe that the Conservatives are a viable opposition, you'll find that the likes of Pam Byrne, Graham Sheldon, they sit on the, those are the types of people who also sit on this standards committee. It's cross-party. So just as they were all covering up for each other with the grooming and gang rape of our town's children, this standards committee is covering up for Howard Sykes. And of course, it shouldn't surprise anyone. It shouldn't surprise anyone whatsoever as to what is taking place with the Standards Committee. If you cast your mind back to Sean Fielding. You'll recall Sean Fielding was referred to the Standards Committee, and the Standards Committee attempted to clear him and not investigate. And then when they were forced to investigate on the specific issue of him inappropriately using his position as leader of the council, they fudged it to some legal team who did not announce their findings, where Sean Fielding was at fault, until after the election when Sean Fielding got kicked out. So this town is corrupt. Criminal council officers protect the likes of Howard Sykes, who are actively involved in sharing the private information of members of the public with a malicious blogger and proven liar so that he can harass, intimidate and bully them. And that was January. And you knew nothing would happen since. Nothing would happen to hold these criminals and corrupt politicians to account. February, and I'm just picking highlights because there's so much. But February, Radcliffe School, were all three Chadderton councillors, Central councillors, are governors of, a child was sexually assaulted and attempted suicide. This young woman attempted suicide after the head teacher and his mates allowed the perpetrator, the attacker, back into the same classroom where he had sexually assaulted this young woman, and this young woman attempted suicide. Not a single word from any of the councillors, governors, the likes of Colin McLaren, governors, senior governors of Radcliffe School, council-run school. Absolutely nothing. Covered up the attempted suicide of, I think it was a 14-year-old girl, covered up by Oldham Council. And we also found that the CSE report would be delayed again. Remember, there was an election coming up in May, and Andy Burnham had promised it would be released in January. Well, conveniently, they released a statement in February that it wasn't going to be released. It was delayed again. Absolute nonsense, bullshit reasons, as we then found out. It was delayed again. And they claimed new evidence had emerged. No new evidence had emerged. We've now gone through the report. No new evidence whatsoever had emerged. All that had emerged was one of the victims going to Maggie Oliver and forcing the review team to meet with her. Because up to the point of Andy Burnham wanting to release his CSE Pakistani grooming gang investigation into Oldham, his team of expert investigators had not met with a single victim. Yes, not met with a single victim. And so it continued. And then what February also brought, and it shouldn't surprise any of you again as to what took place with the Oldham Times and the Oldham Chronicle, was that the Keighley grooming gang perpetrators, their names were plastered over the national press. And it involved the gang members, included a number of them, senior members of the gang were from Oldham, Pakistanis from Oldham, involved in the gang rape and trafficking of children in Keighley. Until we shared the evidence in a now familiar pattern, the Oldham Times and the Oldham Chronicle were involved in the cover-up, helping hide. So we're clear, helping hide the names and identities of members of the grooming gang that were residents of Oldham. March came along and we started the Chadderton South campaign. Remember that campaign with the leaflets? We started the Chadderton South campaign. We knocked on doors, we delivered leaflets, and straight away Shah, McMahon, Amanda Chadderton and all of the Labour Party scumbags, along with their friends in the mainstream media, racist, racist, racist. Well, it wasn't racist, was it? Bringing to public attention that the first Muslim leader of Oldham Council, she self-identified, bringing to public attention the first Pakistani leader of Oldham Council, she self-identified, hung off the arm of a convicted heroin dealer and parted with criminals who'd kidnapped, raped, sexually assaulted, tortured their victims. And when we knocked on the doors in March and April, remember, in defiance of Detective Sergeant Christopher Dean threatening to arrest me, when we knocked on the doors and shared the information, the vast number of the public in South Chadderton were outraged. This had been kept from them. They could not believe what we were sharing. And so the campaign began in earnest, and we know who we pushed. We pushed a Conservative candidate, Robert Barnes. We pushed a Conservative candidate, Robert Barnes. And at the same time as we were campaigning, there was one last council meeting, a now ominous council meeting, but AROOJ SHAH, in her capacity as leader of the council, remember, she'd voted down the motion of an independent inquiry. Her and her mates repeatedly voted down, stood up, and I actually was shocked by it. not only admitted to the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of the town's children, she also claimed that children were still being gang raped today. It was one of her last statements. Meanwhile, in Royton, where we were also campaigning, Hannah Roberts, in her arrogance, in nothing other than her arrogance, goes online and engages with the malicious blogger and claims that CSE, the grooming and gang rape of children, was not an issue for the people of Royton. We used her very own words in our campaign. That was the following May. And we ousted not just AROOJ SHAH, but Hannah Roberts as well, one of the most senior Labour Party councillors in this town. And yes, she made a comeback in Hollingwood because her mate had died, Jean Stretton, whose last words, by the way, was to vote to block a public inquiry. Her last words, a councillor's last words, was to vote against a public inquiry into the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of our town's children. I hope she took that to her grave with her. And I have no remorse in saying that. I hope that woman took that to her grave with her. And I hope her children and her grandchildren remember Jean Stretton as a councillor whose last words heard by members of the public was to vote in favour of blocking a public inquiry into the cover-up of the gang rape of little white girls in our town. So Hannah Roberts didn't fare well, and off she went. And one of the most bizarre events in March was I've been charged and I'm in court. I pleaded not guilty, and there was these case management hearings. And so I'd rock up, and I've had a few of these case management hearings. So I rock up to Manchester Court, go in and sit down, and Warren Bates rocked up. I now had not asked Warren to rock up. He rocked up. I could hear him coming up the escalator in typical Warren fashion. And we had a chat, and because he'd gone to all the trouble to come across, after the case management hearing, I said, I'd walk you back to the tram station, Warren. And we had a coffee. And Warren took a picture and put it on his Twitter page, I think it was, or his Facebook page, I'm not sure, of Warren Bates and Roger Meir sharing, having a chat and having a coffee in Costa. Do you know what that malicious blogger and proven liar did? That so-called journalist that most respectable people have nothing to do with, and it's in his desperation, it's the likes of Jim McMahon, AROOJ SHAH and Amanda Chadderton who engage with him. Do you know what he did? He reported me to the Attorney General for having a coffee in Costa. So desperate is this scumbag in attempting to get me criminalised, he reported me. No, let me change that. Such arrogance in his overinflated opinion of himself, the scumbag reported me and put it all over Twitter how he'd reported me to the Attorney General for having a coffee in Costa. Of course, nothing happened as a consequence of that. So that was March. And in April, I found myself in court yet again. 2 charges, remember? Well, the case brought to me by AROOJ SHAH, who was at the time the leader of the council, collapsed. The case against me collapsed. Now, that woman should be arrested, along with the police officer, Detective Sergeant Christopher Dean, and I would be checking his text messages to see if there were any kiss-kiss messages there. Yes, Detective Sergeant Christopher Dean, wait until I come across your wife. I will find your wife, Detective Sergeant, and I will share what's been leaked to me with your wife, and we'll see how your marriage pans out. Kiss-kiss messages indeed. AROOJ SHAH's case collapses. The official reason is she refuses to give evidence. The leader of the council has me arrested because I objected to her addressing a rally of mainly Muslim people, including young people waving Hamas banners, calling for the eradication of Israel. And I objected to that. I found it offensive. So Detective Sergeant Christopher Dean arrested me, claiming I'd caused offence to the Muslim protesters for calling out their anti-Semitism. I'd caused offence because I pointed out their racism. And I'd caused AROOJ SHAH offence. And then they tried to concoct an entire backstory of how I had done something unlawfully. First of all, it was a racially aggravated public order offence. Then it was malicious communication. And of course it emerges that Detective Sergeant Christopher Dean had never even taken her statement before hammering down my door. Had you, Detective Sergeant, you bent police officer Christopher Dean. Bent, corrupt criminal policeman whose wife really should be checking his text messages on his phone. So Christopher Dean, the case collapses. AROOJ SHAH refuses to give evidence. And do you know what? After repeatedly using my photograph and my name, I've been arrested for this, I've been charged for this. When the case collapses, not a single newspaper article on the collapse of the case against the leader of the council. The leader of the council, with Greater Manchester Police, brings forward a case, and that case collapses in spectacular fashion. And there's not a single newspaper article story on it. What does that say? What does that say? And then in April, because by this point, the Proud of Alderman Saddleworth relationship had gone to pieces, they completely destroyed themselves, as the election in May was to prove. One for reasons only known to Paul Boots Arrock and Debbie Barrett Cole, they decided they'd become Tommy Robinson fans and chant Tommy Robinson's name and promote a petition supporting Tommy Robinson in a town such as ours. Now, I don't know if they showed their true colours or whether they were just angry that I told them where to go. But it didn't end up well. Anyone who affiliates themselves in that way in this town, it's not going to end up well. And the reason it's not going to end up well is because the vast majority of this town, of our town, are not racist. They never were racist. They're not racist in the slightest. And they know the difference between good people and bad people and people who are trying to manipulate them. The BNP did not win seats in Oldham. You know, when their grooming gangs were covered up and they talked about community relations and the election coming up, the BNP did fight that election. And they lost their deposit. This is not a town of racists, contrary to how and what Jim McMahon and his mates want to portray decent white folk as. So when Proud of Alderman Saddleworth did what they did, well, that was the end of Proud of Alderman Saddleworth. Finished. And come the election, they were finished. And the decent candidates that they had, Mark Hince left, created his own party away from the craziness of Paul Boots Arrock and what she called Barrett Cole. And I think he'll win some elections. He'll win some seats this time round, because he had the courage to stand on his own 2 feet and form his own party specific to Shaw and Crompton. So we come to May. We're leafleting like mad. And the scope and scale of what we did should not be underestimated. The entire machinery of the Labour Party, the national machinery of the Labour Party, we fought against in Chadderton South. We fought against the national machinery of the Labour Party. And you know what? We won. We fought the most sophisticated election campaign this town has ever seen, and we got a Conservative elected in Chadderton South who took out the Labour Party leader. And McMahon and Shah and the fake Liberals were fuming. Immediately, racism. Debbie Abrahams was standing up in Parliament calling me a racist. That's right, a privileged white woman was calling me a racist for objecting to the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of white children and raising it as an issue in Chadderton South and objecting to the leader of the council hanging off the arm of Dale Cregan's getaway driver and partying with a man who was convicted for kidnapping, torture and sexual abuse that he filmed. The police turned up and found blood splattered all over the walls. Apparently, I was the racist for raising that with the voters in Chadderton South. And the police did call me several times. And I laughed at them each time regarding my leaflets. And in the end, when the police called me again in June or July or August, they phoned me to confirm that I had done nothing illegal or unlawful. But the phone calls beforehand was to try and intimidate and scare me from campaigning. It didn't work, did it, Christopher Dean? So May, we take out AROOJ SHAH. We take out the leader of Oldham Council, and something predictable takes place. McMahon had 3 proteges when he was leader of the council: Sean Fielding, AROOJ SHAH and Amanda Chadderton. The thickest of the 3 was Amanda Chadderton, so she was the last choice. And she was the last choice, the only choice left as council leader. So, yeah, no, if people want to do this, do that, blah, blah. That muppet became leader of Oldham Council. Arrogant beyond anything Sean Fielding was, contemptuous of the people more than AROOJ SHAH ever was, the worst of the 3 becomes the leader of the council. And the first thing she's got to bat off is that the deputy mayor is also announced. Now, normally the mayor and the deputy mayor are announced at the first council meeting, and the councillors vote them in and support them. You know, even though they've been picked beforehand, there is due process. No. Dr. Zahid Chauhan, who comes to light later in the year, makes his first appearance as the deputy mayor of Oldham, announced in the newspapers in Mirpur, Pakistan. Zahid Chauhan announces his position as deputy mayor of Oldham Council from Mirpur in Pakistan before the people of Oldham knew. I think that just demonstrates where the power is in this town and what is taking place. So that was May. Mr. Mirpur. And June comes along, and the grooming gang report comes out, and immediately the focus is, yes, children were groomed and gang raped, but it wasn't a cover-up. And let me agree with you what I believe a definition of a cover-up is. Something happened and it was kept secret, hidden away. That's what a cover-up means. Well, they admitted that Shabir Daddy Ahmed, the ringleader of the Rochdale grooming gang, worked for Oldham Council for 18 years. And they admitted he had access to children. In fact, from what I can make out, he was selling children from his little black book while sat in the Pakistani community centre from where he worked from. He was also identifying vulnerable children from his other positions, including through the Labour Party, and the fact that he was a trustee, a director of the Citizens Advice Bureau, which was kept from the report, by the way. What wasn't kept from the report was when the police found out and arrested and charged him, they didn't tell Oldham Council, and he was allowed to continue working. And as Abdul Jabbar found out, as he slid underneath the toilet, underneath his chair, sorry, not the toilet, I'd have flushed his head down the toilet. I think I'd enjoy. Would I? I'd enjoy watching Abdul Jabbar's head being flushed down the toilet, I think. Does that mean? It's an Ali Akbar. It's an Ali Akbar cartoon, isn't it? Of Jabbar having his head flushed down the toilet. Councillor Jabbar having his head flushed down the toilet. Anyway, Councillor Jabbar tried to backtrack on his relationship with Shabir Ahmed, and he has no recollection of giving him a reference. Whilst Mayor, my information has been consistent throughout, and the person who gave me this information is the person who told me about Shabir Ahmed, and that's come out to be true, was that whilst Mayor Jabbar, or someone in the Mayor's office, whilst Jabbar was Mayor, gave a reference, some form of character reference, to try and keep Shabir Ahmed out of prison or mitigate his sentence. Now, did that happen? If it didn't happen, all Jabbar had to do was say it didn't happen. Instead, at that council meeting, that extraordinary council meeting that made national news, he was sliding underneath the chair. And within days of that report coming out, Jim McMahon held what's known as an adjournment debate in Parliament. Burnham's cover-up merchants, even they had been unable to hide that children in our town were groomed and gang raped, and crimes against them had been covered up, and parents hadn't been told. Schools hadn't been told. Everything we'd said has come out true. But it wasn't a cover-up, apparently. Series of unintended mistakes. Or there were reasons for it. Even came out that his head of communications was actively involved in helping kill the story repeated times, and McMahon was directly involved in that. McMahon stands up in an almost empty Parliament. By this point, no one in the Labour Party, apart from Debbie Kashmir, want anything to do with him. So he stands up, and instead of condemning what had happened, calling for a public inquiry, announces his resignation for his complicity, he names me as a racist. He names me in Parliament as a far-right activist and racist. And when we knew what was going to happen, so my friend Moib took some time off work and caught the train down to London, because Moib lives in Oldham and his MP is Jim McMahon, and he went to Parliament to exercise his democratic right to meet with his MP. And he came online on one of our transmissions and said, "Jim, buy me a coffee. I'm coming now." You know what that hamster-cheeked, samosa-nibbling piece of turd did? He tried to have Moib prosecuted. He tried to have Moib prosecuted. The MP for Oldham Western Royton has hardly been seen since. He's only seen in his Asian areas or popping up in town without announcement. He's in hiding. The hamster-cheeked samosa nibbler Jim McMahon, Jim Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon, in 2022 was exposed as complicit in the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of white working-class children by Pakistani rape gangs. The would-be Prime Minister, Labour Party leader Jim Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was exposed for his role in the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of little white girls. Sue me, arrest me, do what you want. It's not going to work. DS Dean, give me a call. You don't need to come round with 8 police officers. I'll come over to the police station. But the MP for Oldham West and Royton, Jim McMahon, was in 2022 exposed for his role in the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of little white girls by Pakistani rape gangs. Can't sue me for telling the truth. And as the police have found out, it's extremely difficult to prosecute me for telling the truth. So this grooming gang report comes out, and there's this council meeting, and Burnham turns up. And sat at the front is that priest. And she stands up to do a prayer, trying to protect the council that had just been found nationally exposed for its role in failing children. You can argue with me about the cover-up or whatnot, but nationally exposed. And you know what that priest does? She wants us to pray for the council. And immediately, 100 people, because that council room was packed, stand up and turn their back. Turned their backs on the priest and the prayers in that council meeting. Then emerges the priest, I forget her name, so you'll have to excuse me. Her organisation is funded by the council. Well, why did any of us think the corruption would just stop with the police and the press and the council officers? It's now expanded to the religious organisation, the Church of England, involved. And of course, at some point in 2022, the Church of England themselves were forced to apologise for their role in raping little boys and little girls. So this meeting happened. Complete chaos, because they tried to manipulate and lie. The Director of Children's Services is exposed, called a liar repeatedly by a number of councillors, because he emerges and he was smirking throughout the meeting. He was smirking. It emerges that he was involved in trying to prevent victims from testifying. The Director of Children's Services was confirmed in the report, in the Burnham's own report, as trying to prevent victims from giving testimony. And then it emerges that the 24 hours previous to the council meeting, the police had contacted Child A, who's named as Child A in the report, and threatened her with arrest. The police from Operation Sherwood that they'd set up had contacted a victim and threatened to arrest her because she shared what had happened to her with the public in the town. Oh yeah, the report never shared anything apart from what happened to Sophie. And that was already in the public domain. So all the other victims, what had happened to them has been hidden and remained hidden. To this day, Oldham Council won't even confirm how many of our children were groomed and gang raped. So absolute carnage in that council meeting. And at the follow-up meeting, there's a motion. At the follow-up meeting, there's a motion brought by the Conservatives and FIP wanting a public inquiry. Amanda Chadderton, the leader of the council, stands up and claims that being groomed and gang raped did not destroy lives. You can't say it's destroyed their lives. Amanda Chatterton, the leader of Oldham Council, stands up in the lead up to a vote asking for a public inquiry into the now confirmed cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of our town's children. Now, Amanda Chatterton won't even say how many of our children were groomed and gang raped by a Pakistani bloc vote mates in the Labour Party. And she had the audacity to stand up and claim that being groomed and gang raped didn't destroy lives. And then rewrites the motion against the council's own constitution, and guess who supports it? The mayor, the borough solicitor Paul Bentwhistle, and the backdoor, equally corrupt chief executive Harry Hitler. They rewrite the motion. Complete outrage. And the consequence of that meeting, and people are right to be angry, was that the council, in partnership with the police, identify members of the public, unlawfully identify members of the public, and try and send them fake ASBI letters with a series of malicious and false allegations on every one. And some of the allegations, well, I suppose they're accurate, are completely bizarre. He looked at me funny. He was wagging his finger at me. Since when did wagging your finger become unlawful from a public gallery? Whilst the council leader is saying, you can't say being groomed and gang raped did not destroy lives, and wagging your finger and saying, how dare you? Since what? Who is the criminal there? Well, if you believe Amanda Chatterton and Greater Manchester Police, the criminals were members of the public. Not a single person has been arrested. Not a single person has been charged. The allegations have been found to be false and malicious, and it is a complete affront to democracy, what they've done in that council chamber in blocking members of the public from attending. So it goes all quiet, and they realise that these transmissions are getting more and more and more popular. So they unleash Charlotte Green, the local democracy reporter paid for by the BBC licence payer, who is neck deep herself involved in the cover-up of the gang rape of our town's children. Charlotte Green, in August, sent me a list of questions. I answered her questions online via a transmission. She was meant to be writing an article on me. That article has never come about because she was being paid to do a hatchet piece on me. This is the local democracy reporter based from the Manchester Evening News, whose job is to hold the corrupt politicians to account. And what did we find out? That she is neck deep in the complicity of the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of children. So much so that at that very council meeting in June, Oldham Council claimed Charlotte Green had been harassed and intimidated by Warren Bates, and they used that to ban Warren Bates from the council meetings. Charlotte Green only needs to issue a statement to say this is false and fabricated, and an innocent man's name will be cleared completely. It's been 8 months and she's not said a single word, so she's complicit. So when you see this little blonde woman from South Manchester, Didsbury or Charlton, one of those areas, you know, rides a bicycle, grows herbs in her backyard, drinks fancy red wine, eats kebabs on rush home at 4 a.m, and likes to pretend, you know, she's with it. Funded by the BBC tax. And she wanted to know, one of her questions, she wanted to know why I was no longer selling mugs and t-shirts, and how much money I'd made. This is a woman who's paid £30,000 a year minimum from the BBC taxpayer to cover up for the grooming and gang rape of children. So Charlotte Green never came back. Charlotte Green never came back. But with what she's done to Warren Bates, she's complicit. Can you imagine? You were a witness, or you were the victim, and you really weren't a victim. And an 80-something-year-old man had been criminalised, and all you had to say was, this is a lie. No. And of course, in August, Dirty Harry Caffrell, Harry Hitler, straight out of Goebbels' book of propaganda, decided that all the previous council meetings that were online, the video footage, would be removed. They removed all of them. They removed all of it because we'd exposed them and exposed them and exposed their lies and lies and lies, and they removed all of it. There was a national outcry as to the actions of Oldham Council in trying to hide public records. And Amanda Chadderton, she thinks you're all as thick as she is, stands up in the subsequent council meeting and claims it was a mistake. That's not what they meant at all. Outright lie. She had the audacity, but you know, of course she had the audacity to lie. She's a liar. She's involved in protecting Pakistani rape gangs. So the archives came back and we moved into September. It's been quite a year. The councillor who was speaking out the most from the Conservatives was Robert Barnes, the man we'd helped get elected. His speeches had been powerful. And what do we find out in September? We hear of an unnamed councillor, Conservative councillor, but it's done in such a way it's very obvious who it is, has been arrested for rape. Arrested for rape. Now, in the world I come from, if you're arrested from rape, you're pretty much charged straight away. You know, there's forensic evidence, DNA evidence. So if rape did happen, you'd be charged straight away. We're now in January. There's been no charges, just the extension of bail and the extension of bail. It's clearly broken, the councillor. And we all saw the climb down apology that came. Not everyone's strong, you know. Not everyone's strong enough. Not everyone is strong enough to fight this lot the way we have been fighting this lot for 4 years. Now, I believe that rape was a setup. And the longer the councillor's not charged, the more likely it looks like it was a setup. And for those of you who are sceptical about whether or not things can be set up in Oldham, well, I ask you to look at the firebombing of AROOJ Shah's car. It was an attempt to frame me. It was an attempt to incriminate many of you. And the CCTV footage clearly shows something else. And to this day, the policeman, the most senior policeman in Oldham, smearing at the councillor. The Conservative councillor says what? It's still a live investigation. Like bugger, it's still a live investigation. You bent criminal police officers. You failed to incriminate me. You failed to frame me in the firebombing of a car. And now you're refusing to follow the evidence because you know where the evidence leads. And at the September council meeting, FIP and the Conservatives tried again, and the CSE motion this time was allowed to be voted on. And guess what? They voted it down. And it was the last time Councillor Jean Stretton, now dead in her grave, it's the last time her voice was heard in a council meeting, blocking the first female leader of Oldham Council, voting to block calls for a government inquiry into the grooming and gang rape of little white girls from Hollingwood Councillor. Limeside, there were girls from Limeside systematically groomed and gang raped in this town, and the councillor representing them, now that the cover-up had been exposed, blocked a motion asking for a public inquiry. October comes along. And what happens? The Bradford CSE County Lines investigation comes out again with links to Oldham, and again is covered up. What's become very clear is children were groomed in Oldham and peddled else out of the town, and children from outside of the town, Bradford, Keighley, whatever, were peddled into Oldham, Rochdale, Manchester. These Pakistani old men, and yes, there were Bangladeshi men as well, these slime balls, they were lining up in hotel rooms and on the top floors of takeaways and taxi ranks, waiting for girls to be brought to them, children to be brought to them, so they could rape them, drug them up and rape them. A county lines operation, transporting little white girls from one town to another across the north of England. And again, Oldham at the centre. And what does Amanda Chadderton, the white woman, do? She votes down a motion calling for a public inquiry. Why would you block a public inquiry? Why would you vote against calling in the government to get to deliver justice for these children, to hold the criminals to account and those who failed these children? That is Amanda Chadderton's legacy as leader of Oldham Council, irrespective of what happens in May. This woman, this white woman, has been responsible for protecting Pakistani rape gangs. Now why? I know why. I like to think I know why. It's because it's to do with the bloc Muslim vote. It's to do with the bloc Muslim vote. So we move on to November. Hope you're enjoying my whistle stop analysis review of the year. If you're finding value in this, by the way, if you're one of the 121 people who've joined me so far who are finding value in this transmission, at the very least like the transmission. I think I've got 39 likes so far. At the very least like the transmission. If you're one of the many who view these transmissions and do not in any way contribute, then please consider buying me a samosa. The links are at the top. It's £2 to buy me a samosa. Please do consider buying me a samosa. And sharing. Subscribe to the channel. It's completely free. Subscribe to the channel. November comes along. We once again expose Dr. Zahid Chauhan's role in Royton Health Centre and also the Failsworth Medical Facility. I described it as a death trap, and I used the dictionary definition. His lawyers wrote to me. I wrote back and I complained about his lawyers to the Solicitors Regulatory Authority. I'm still waiting for a response from his lawyers, to those of you who've asked me. What they did not like was that Dr. Zahid Chauhan, forget just what happened at Royton Medical Centre, and the Royton Independents put up a public meeting, invited the council leader, invited the MP, invited Dr. Chauhan. Not one of them turned up to meet with residents of Royton, patients of that medical centre. Not one turned up. So what happened was the information regarding Bardock emerged. And Dr. Chauhan had the audacity to claim Bardock wasn't his company, although his solicitors, after had exposed him and Bardock, confirmed in writing to me that Bardock was indeed Dr. Chauhan's company. And the scandal involving Bardock and a contract by Oldham Council will not go away. Dirty Harry Caffrell, Harry Hitler, and his mates might want it to go away, and Amanda Chadderton might want it to go away. She claimed it should be remembered Bardock is a not-for-profit company. Well then, the finances of Bardock confirmed that Dr. Chauhan and his mates had taken over £1 million in direct third-party payments from this so-called not-for-profit company. And then it emerges that Oldham Council had given Bardock the best part of £1 million contract for swabbing services using your money that Dr. Chauhan forgot to declare, or decided not to declare as part of the contract, but the council seemed to be clear that he wasn't involved, even though he'd not made a declaration. All of you follow what Harry Hitler said. He declared it to his mates. That doesn't count as a declaration, by the way. There's official paperwork that's got to be filled in, and that official paperwork wasn't filled in. But the best part of £1 million was for swabbing services. We paid Dr. Chauhan's company, Bardock, the best part of £1 million to apparently teach people to swab. The council are refusing to release details of how many people Dr. Chauhan's company, Bardock Limited, taught. You know, if I've been given a contract, we have something called outputs. What were the outputs? How many people did Dr. Chauhan's company, Bardock, teach to swab? Why won't? And remember, they renewed this contract. So in renewing this contract, some paperwork would have been submitted as to what services had been delivered before you renewed the contract. Amanda Chadderton, Harry Hitler, Paul Bentwistle won't release that information. I think we all know why. I think we all know why. And then, in December, in the lead up to Christmas, as we're desperately trying to increase our subscriptions and keep this the transmissions running, and a lesson I learnt, another lesson I learnt was how people continue to use you shamelessly, but won't support you. Was you get to a council meeting, and the standout moment for me in this entire year happened right just before Christmas, where Councillor Mark Wilkinson bravely stands up and objects to how members of the public are denied access into a council meeting, a public meeting, and how he's been in prisons. It's been easier for him to get into prisons than it is for members of Oldham's public to get into a council meeting. And that is where we are currently up to. Democracy is dead in Oldham. They've sold our children, just as they've sold our swimming baths and our history and heritage to a largely Pakistani, Muslim bloc vote. And there has not been any line that these white politicians have not been prepared to cross to maintain power and control. I'm sorry if I'm in a soft focus, I'm afraid. There's nothing I can do about that. So you are listening to me. So I think my words are, I hope my words have been of value to you. So, and I'm on a different camera, I'm afraid, so I'm not sure what or why I'm in soft focus, mate. I'm chatting to older Mai, I think, is what I'm doing. And thank you, Denise. And that is a whistle-stop tour of what was 2022. And for those who claim we are ineffective or we don't make any difference, well, just look at the difference we've made. Just look at the difference we've made. (2023) all-out elections in May. I will be this week releasing a document that I refer to as the Recusant Charter of what I believe the opposition parties should all sign up to. I'll put this in the public domain, and that will be pretty much the extent of my campaigning for the year. If none of the opposition parties come forward to support me, then the lessons from last year is that why should I risk myself and put myself on the front line? So it's entirely up to the opposition parties. And if the opposition parties believe they can win an election without the coordination and the insights that are offered via these transmissions and the work I do, well, best of luck to all of you. So do look out for the document. It'll be a document I'll be released at some point this week. I'm going to start writing it tomorrow, or continue writing it tomorrow. And I'll get that shared, so have a look at that. And my intention is moving forward, for those who've continued to support me, is that I will release a series of more frequent transmissions during the week, providing analysis and insight into things that are taking place in the town and giving you, the space to discuss, debate, and also to make sense of what's going on. So I'll do all of those insights. I'm going to put it all out for free. It's only possible. These transmissions, the work I do is only possible because we are community funded. My work is, and they're angry. The malicious blogger and all their mates are angry. But the reason I do my work and I can fund it to do my work, nowhere near minimum wage yet, but funded to do my work, is because the people of this town support me to do my work and value the analysis and insight and what I bring. Where I'm going to draw a line is in the campaigning. I'll put the manifesto out, the charter out, and we'll see what comes from there. But otherwise, please don't contact me asking me to do this or do that, because those days are done. Let's see what 2023 brings. Happy New Year. Very good evening to all of you. And please, as blurry as I am or as pin sharp as the thing behind me is, if you find value in these transmissions, subscribe to the channel. I'll get my other camera back for next time. A very, very good evening.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.